I'm Greg Hackney, and let's talk about picking hooks for plastics. You know, Gamakatsu has so many great hooks. Pretty much have a hook for any size bait, any technique, whatever. And honestly, it can be a little overwhelming because there's so many hooks. So a lot of times, the first thing I think of is, how am I gonna set the hook? Am I casting, am I flipping, or I'm pitching? And of course, with those, like if I'm punching or flipping or that type of deal, I know I'm gonna use a heavier wire hook. You know, I want a hook that will not flex, because chances are I'm up close. And for me personally, I would say 99.9% of the time, regardless of the style of bait, you know, whether it can be a worm, it could be a rodent, it could be a, you know, whatever creature bait, whatever it is, when I'm flipping, 99.9% of the time I use a straight shank. Probably 95% of the time I use a G-Power flipping hook. Slick coating, strong hook. You can use it with braid or fluorocarbon, but I always think about that. If I'm up close, powerful hook set, I always like that straight shank hook. Now, with that being said, if it's more, even with, it could be even the same plastic that I was flipping, if I'm casting that piece of plastic, I have a tendency to pull the hook. And when I do that, I'll either use more of a round bend style hook or an EWG style hook. But for me personally, these hooks work better with what I call a pull hook set. Like it could be on a Carolina rig, it could be I'm throwing a Texas rig, throwing a weightless stick bait, but I'm casting. And so the deal is, what I do when I get bit on a long cast, fishing away from the boat, regardless Texas rig, Carolina rig, or even weightless, I like to reel down and be on that fish, and I'm basically pulling that hook. Because the one thing you'll notice with an EWG style hook is the hook point is in line. You know, yeah, you have a big bite. That big bite is to take up big pieces of plastic, you know, but the hook point is in line. So I feel like this hook is made more for getting that hook started. So basically, when you put pressure on that fish and you cause him to crush that bait, he crushes down on it and you're just pulling it and pulling it in. And once you get a hook like this locked in, I mean, it's almost impossible for a fish to come out. But I do think there's an argument out there. I don't like this style of hook. This is all personal opinion. I don't like this style of hook for up close and real powerful fast hook sets. I like this more for casting and pulling the hook. But I just think that's a pretty good rule of thumb. And then the other way I would pick is, regardless of which hook I'm using, is to have one that fits the plastic perfectly. You know where the strike zone is on the piece of plastic, so I want a hook that takes up all of that. I basically want the biggest hook I can get away with without it looking abnormal in the plastic bait I'm using. But I want to be able to take up all of that plastic, because I feel like that makes my hookup ratio bigger. And last but not least with that, when picking a hook, is also the size of the weight I'm using. So if I'm flipping or pitching and punching mats, I typically will maybe even go oversized on the hook. Like I just need just enough plastic in that situation to cover the hook point and cover the hook up. Because the deal is, I'm gonna make up for that big weight. You got all that big piece of lead up there, where it's a 1 ounce, 1.25 ounces, even 1.5 ounces, even up to a 2 ounce. So I feel like my hookup is a lot better by using a bigger hook. So let's just say if I'm planking a rage bug shallow with a small weight, typically I use a 4/0 G-Power hook. If I'm flipping that rage bug with a big weight, 3/4 ounce, 1.25 ounces, 1.5 ounces, I upgrade to a 5. Now the 5's a little more tricky to rig in there, but I want all the hook I can when I'm using that big weight. A couple other things that I know you've probably seen a lot of it out there on social media is the Nano Alpha. And so basically what the Nano Alpha is the coating that goes on the hooks. It makes the hooks slicker, and what's really, and with it being slicker, increases hook penetration. Just makes it a lot easier to set the hook. But probably for me personally, we all know this in boats that, you know, we're fishing in the rain, things get wet. I like to take my hooks out and put them in a box by themselves. All of our soft plastics have salt in them. That Nano Alpha coating also is just almost completely rust resistant. And that's just some things to think about when you're picking hooks. But again, you could be a guy that is more of that pulling style hook set when you're flipping. And if you are, you're probably better off to use a EWG Superline hook over a straight shank. You know, so it just depends on who you are and what technique and the way you like to set the hook. There's really no wrong way in fishing. It's all each to his own. It's whatever works for you. But matching the right hook with the right technique, with the right lure, will make you a lot more efficient, and it will catch you extra fish.